It didn't start with handcuffs. It didn't start with an arrest. It started with a sentence buried inside an email. Casual, confident, and never meant to be seen. Because the most powerful scandals don't explode, they leak. And when the Jeffrey Epstein files finally cracked open, they didn't just expose crimes. They exposed comfort, familiarity, influence spoken in private language, 3 million pages, hundreds of thousands of images, thousands of videos. But the most chilling evidence wasn't visual, it was conversational. When power stops whispering, these weren't messages written in fear. They weren't defensive. They weren't cautious. They were written like notes between equals. The emails tied to Lord Peter Mandelson, one of Britain's most powerful political operators, revealed something deeply unsettling. Epstein wasn't knocking on doors. He was already inside inboxes, inside political timing, inside conversations that move markets and governments. And the tone, relaxed, strategic, almost playful. That's what made them terrifying. Money that doesn't ask permission. When investigators traced financial records, the numbers didn't scream corruption. They whispered it. Transfers, payments, tuition fees covered quietly, expenses absorbed without explanation. Nothing dramatic on its own, nothing that screams crime. But together, they formed a pattern that raised one brutal question. Why would a convicted sex offender be financially intertwined with a senior government figure? And why would no one remember it? Amnesia, it turns out, is a common symptom when power feels threatened. The email that crossed a line. One message stood out, not for what it said, but for what it assumed. Sensitive government discussions, economic strategies, conversations meant for closed rooms, shared casually, forwarded without hesitation, as if confidentiality had expired, as if power had decided rules were optional. One former advisor called it what many were thinking, but few would say out loud. A breach of trust so severe it made his skin crawl, because this wasn't gossip, it was governance. When Epstein starts giving advice. Here's where the story turns darker. Epstein wasn't just receiving information, he was suggesting outcomes. Lobby this, adjust that, delay here, push there. Not demands, suggestions. The kind that only work if the recipient believes the sender has leverage. And Mandelson didn't shut it down, he engaged. That single fact changes everything. The moment politics and blackmail collide, at one point Epstein referenced elections, timing, allies, consequences. The implication was subtle but unmistakable. Power requires friends, and friends keep secrets. That's when this stops being about emails and starts being about pressure, because no one warns you unless they believe they can hurt you. The email sent before history changed. Perhaps the most chilling moment came when Epstein appeared to receive information before the public did. Major financial movements, political shifts, decisions that would rock Europe, and then, almost like clockwork, the world followed. Resignations, announcements, collapses. Coincidence? Maybe. But coincidences don't usually have timestamps. Jokes that shouldn't exist. Then came the humor. Private jokes, inappropriate remarks, comments that revealed comfort, not caution. They joked about royalty, about identity, about social norms. Not the kind of jokes you make with someone you barely know. The kind you make when you believe nothing you say will ever leave the room. That confidence, that assumption of secrecy, is the most revealing detail of all. When denial becomes a strategy, when the emails surfaced, the response was immediate. I don't remember. I have no record. I question the authenticity. These aren't explanations, they're damage control reflexes, because memory is convenient when it protects you, and unreliable when it doesn't. The regret that came too late, public pressure mounted, questions got sharper, and then came the sentence no institution wants to utter. I regret appointing him. Regret doesn't mean innocence, it means acknowledgement that something went wrong before anyone was ready to admit it. And suddenly, this wasn't just about Epstein, it was about who vouched for whom. When the law finally looks up, eventually authorities stepped in, not with accusations of what Epstein did, but what others may have allowed. Misconduct in public office, a phrase that sounds sterile until you realize what it implies. That power may have been used against the public interest, and that silence may have been the currency. The most disturbing realization, here's the part that should unsettle everyone watching. The emails don't prove crimes. They prove something worse. They prove access. They prove Epstein wasn't isolated. He wasn't avoided. He wasn't shunned. He was consulted. That's not a failure of law. That's a failure of culture. Why this story isn't over. Epstein is gone, but the network isn't. Because emails don't lie, they wait. And every new release raises the same uncomfortable truth. Power doesn't collapse from outside pressure. It collapses when private behavior becomes public. And right now, the inboxes are still opening. The question that lingers the real scandal isn't who emailed Epstein. It's who felt safe doing it, who believed consequences were optional, who assumed history would never read their messages aloud, and who still believes that today. This isn't a story about one man. It's about what happens when influence forgets accountability, when secrets feel safer than honesty, and when power assumes the delete button is permanent. Because somewhere, right now, another email exists, and it hasn't been opened yet. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. It was supposed to, because the most dangerous truths aren't hidden in darkness. They're hidden in plain sight. If you believe power should be questioned, not protected, if you think silence should never be safer than truth, like this video. It tells the algorithm this story matters. Subscribe to the channel, because these aren't isolated scandals, they're patterns. And comment below, do you think these emails reveal coincidence, or a system that protected itself for far too long? New files are still coming, new names are still emerging, and we'll be here, opening the inboxes they hoped would stay closed. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and never stop asking who's really in control.